Good afternoon, good night, good morning to all my friends overseas. Now I'm going to explain what happened with the poetry during the Middle Age, but concerning the name is Britain cycle. Britain cycle, what that means? In France, they start doing poetry using Britain legends, and this is very, very amazing. It was not a British people that started doing sonnets and poems about what happened in England, not England, Britain. The first name was Britain. So, Breton, this word comes from Breton, that's Breton, yes, that was in Middle Age, and this name was applied to distinguish from the cycle from France. In France it was French, yeah, French. But in Britain, in the British, in Britain, England, it was not England, but Britain. It was Britannia, comes from Britannia, from Latin. So they used it, yes, the epopees or the fiddle writings, sonnets and poems, and the name was about fantasies, was the main theme that they chose, because it was a land where there was several types of legends. That was when they created the fairies, the magicians, these fantastic beasts like a dragon, and adventures, so many adventures. So the French people decided to write about it. It was really very, very interesting for the acceptance in the big, huge palaces that were already built in France. So, Lambert, it was two kinds of poesy. That was, I must say, that was the Celtic spirit that took in that land. And then they decided to write poems based on these famous people, because it was very, very interesting. I am very happy to say that the inspiration was very, very interesting, because first I must talk about what happened some years before. That was the ancient times depicted in the poetry in the Middle Age, in French, always in French. After France comes, not Italy, not Britain, but Portugal, but we'll talk later. So that was in the mid of Middle Age, the 11th century, and they have to discuss first the major legend that comes from two places, Rome and Greece. In Greece, they decide to talk about, and also Macedonia. Macedonia that time was already a land. And they decided to write about those adventures and the wars that really happened that time. The first one, it was many parts, it's not necessary to talk about it, so I decided to take two events that happened that time. That the first one was about the life of Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great died very young. God knows about the epic adventures of Alexander. And the first to write, it was, and the name was Roman d'Alexandre. In French, about the Greeks. Yes, there was also, later we will see, Homerus. It was a great Greek poet. Homero and also Pindar from Theban. Yeah, both were good writers and poets. But we are talking the West, so I prefer to start in the Middle Age. That was when it was, that was due to the beginning of the written poetry. The ancient Greek, they wrote more as an essays. And in France, no, was where came the troubadour. And they used it to play or to recite their short poems. Yeah, not in Greece, but in France. So I prefer to talk about these two. Alexandre, Le Roman d'Alexandre was written by two poets. And it's very amazing because that time they used two poets as we do nowadays with a duo. So you have someone from India that I wrote one or more, two duo poems. I am from Brazil, and there was a very good poet from India. And then afterwards, in the group that I write my poems, and I participate in the administration staff, I wrote a poem with a Mexican lady, and she, Anna Stopier. And I was very interested because I read my poem in Portuguese, and she read her poesy, the same poem, but we divide the strophes and give one to the other in a pair number. That means that I had two strophes to present in my audio to recite, and she had also two strophes to recite. So that's a duo. And with the other poet, now it was all written. And sometimes we use 4 lines, and short poems cannot be too long because it will be submitted to the press. In that time, no, they had the opportunity to write many pages about the event that happened. So we start with the Roman d'Alexandre. Well, the authors was Lambert Le Tors and Alexandre de Paris. So it is not related directly to the emperor and king Alexander. He died young. He could conquer Syria and Persia, and he went to India. So that's a very ancient time, before Middle Age, yeah, the antiquity. And then he could write about the death of his beloved horse named Bucéfalo. So the name of the poem is La Mort, the death of Bucéfalos. La Mort de Bucéfalo. The death of Bucéfalo. And that was Lambert Le Tors, and Alexandre de Paris, and de Paris. They were the first poets to write 10 to 12 syllables verse. Then that's why we say today that I can write in Alexandrino way. Yeah? So that time in Middle Age to nowadays we still use the Alexandrino, yeah, way. I can only pronounce like in Portuguese and also in French, but it's Alexandrine way. And that came the name Alexandrine. And I can read a little bit, but Alexandre est parvenu au dernier terme, où peut sauver l'humanité, et pour seulement il n'est rien. Yeah. When he lost Bucéfalo, he was very sad, and he came to the conclusion that it is a thing that can happen in many kinds. So, and energia, he could not say anything. So we had this, and that's what I have to say about the Alexander. And then came another one, that was the French cycle about the adventures, epopee. And then came a very known poet of that time, that was more or less in 160. That's Middle Age, and the name of the poet was Benoit de Sainte More. And he wrote to the Queen Eleanor de Poitiers. She was the wife of Henry Le Tors, Henry the Third, and he did the famous poem titled Roman de Troie, the Romance of Troia. And he was not inspired by Homero. Homero was a Greek poet, many know, and my brother's name was Homero. And then he wrote about the Odyssey and the Iliad. And the Iliad was very well known about all the conquests that the Greeks made. And Odyssey was linked to the war that happened in Troy. What happened is that in Troy was a king, Priamo, and he had two sons. The name of the oldest one is Ato, and the name of the young one, Paris. Paris goes to Greece, and he went to the palace of King Menelao and met Helena. And she was the most beautiful woman in the world, considering that time. He kidnapped Helena, and then started a big war. That war, it was in the poem of Alexandre de Paris and his companionship. It was giving a very strong impact on the death of Achilles. Who was Achilles? Achilles was a friend of Ulysses, and Ulysses was who inspired Homer to write his Odyssey. And then Helena le rien et le grippe to see Daniel sur Paris. Leva des choses et au solier le pour. It was not necessary to say to translate because it's very old French. But what happened is this is a very sad story, because Achilles was known as the most brave warrior from Greece, and he died because of someone put in he was killed in the posterior part of his leg. I think he bled and then he died. And the end of the story is that King Priamo is dead, is also killed. Prince Ato is dead. And they say that Paris and Helena fled away and went to live their lives. Some say so, some say no, it doesn't happen. But the first poem about it was made by a Frenchman, and he was from Paris, and it's very interesting. I thank you very much for accompanying me, for following my channel, and please don't forget to give a click. Thank you, and until next time.